Hello, everybody. I'm back again on the moon, talking to you about line of sight in Warhammer The Old World. Now, I don't think there's really a problem with the rules on this topic, but I do think it is a bit complicated. At least I struggled when I first read the rules to understand what it was really saying. And I think it's worth a conversation with your opponent before you start a game, particularly if you see them deploying their models in such a way which is going to be detrimental to their game. If their models don't have line of sight, just sort of stop, check you understand it, check they understand it, and that they've been playing it the right way. So you don't have that feel bad moment sort of midway through the game where they think they have line of sight and they don't, or vice versa. And at tournaments as well, right? Or any event where you're playing a stranger that you've met for the first time, might have 5 minutes to have a conversation with them before the game, but otherwise you're just jumping straight into it and you want to make sure that you're on the same page. And tournament organizers need to be on top of this as well to make sure there is clarity of understanding. So let's jump straight in then. What does it say? So it says to check line of sight between models, stoop down to look from the model's point of view. Now, that phrase, stoop down, kind of implies that the height of the model matters, right? That it's true line of sight, as we say. So you've got to look from the model's point of view. What can the model see? Can the model see over units? Can it see between units? Does it have an uninterrupted line? Well, that's what it says on this first bullet point here, right? If a straight uninterrupted line can be drawn from within the model's vision arc to any part of another model, there is line of sight. But this second bullet point, it says if no such line can be drawn to the other model due to intervening terrain, and I'll come to terrain in a bit, or without crossing over or through another model, there is no line of sight. Okay, so you can't see over other models. Now, to me, I found this a bit confusing, right? Because it's kind of contradicting what it said initially, which is that you stoop down to look from the model's point of view. In other words, first of all, it says the height of the model matters. And now it's saying, well, the height of the model doesn't really matter because you can't see over other models. And I'll come to terrain a bit later, but you can't see through other models. Now, it doesn't say what it really means by through. Does it actually mean through the model itself or under its arm, between its legs, whatever? But you can't see through other models. Now, I'm interpreting that as you can't see over the base of another model, because typically in this game, we consider the base as part of the model, right? So if you can't see over another model. Okay. There are exceptions to this, of course. So there's the large target rule, where it says, in addition, a model can draw a line of sight to a model with this special rule over or through other models and vice versa, right? So if you're a large target, you can see over or through other models, and if you're shooting at a large target or you want to charge a large target, you can see through or over other models. Now, it actually says through other models. Now, obviously, this is a game, right? And there's going to be simplifications in order to just allow the game to progress, right? And so everybody accepts that you can't simulate a battle exactly, right? You've got to have simplification. So they're just basically saying, look, if the model's big enough, then it can draw a line of sight easily, and you can draw a line of sight to that model very easily. Yeah. So that's why it says over or through the model. But I mean, there are some things that are a bit counterintuitive, right? I mean, let's take this blurb here for monstrous infantry. It says the monstrous infantry subcategory covers things like trolls, ogres, and minotaurs, creatures that are roughly man-shaped and fight on foot, but that are 2 or 3 times the size of regular infantry. 2 or 3 times the size, right? But an ogre or a troll cannot see over a man. Now, to me, that's just counterintuitive, right? I wouldn't think about that when I'm deploying my models. And I've just got to get into the habit of doing it, right? Because that's what the rules say. But it does seem weird, right? Why can uh, I get, say, within these categories, right? Infantry, for example. Okay, a man can't see over a dwarf. Now, normally a man would be able to see over a dwarf because dwarves are supposed to be short, right? But I get it. Okay, they're both in the infantry category. So, in order to simplify the game, we're saying infantry can't see over other infantry. But monstrous infantry, an ogre that's 2 or 3 times the size of a man, can't see over a man, or a man on a horse can't see over a man that's not on a horse. That I find it a bit weird, right? I mean, I've just taken a couple of screenshots from the rulebook here, but look, those Pegasus Knights in the background there can't see over those peasant bowmen, or these stalkers. I can't remember the name now. Big snakes can't see over these skeleton skeleton warriors. You know, it kind of doesn't make sense intuitively, you know. And obviously, these pictures are not scenes of a real battle, right? They're just studio photos designed to show off the models. But, you know, you can just get an idea of these are all Citadel models, right? And so you've got a big model that's monstrous infantry or monstrous cavalry that can't see over other infantry or cavalry or whatever, even if the model's like twice the size. And now we look at things like hills, right? Now, hills say have another exception to the rule. Okay. So reading from the middle here, it says any unit that is entirely on a hill can draw a line of sight across or through other units or models that are not themselves on a hill. And there again, it says across or through other units. So there is no distinction really between the height of the model doesn't really matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you've got a tall model or a short model. Again, assuming there's no terrain in the way, and we're just talking about seeing through models or over models, I can't see an actual reason why you would have to stoop down to see from the point of view of the model, right? I mean, just use a ruler or a stick or a laser pen or whatever you've got to hand, a tape measure to see is there a line of sight. You don't really need to stoop down because all the situations are covered. Same thing with buildings or towers, which is, it says in the rulebook here, a unit that occupies a tower can draw a line of sight across or through other units or models. So if you can see through other models, then why do you need to stoop down to see if you can see over a model? You can just see through it, right? Um, but then we have this FAQ that Games Workshop put out, which I think is just bizarre. Um, and it makes me wonder how frequently these questions are actually asked. But anyway, it's an FAQ. Can a unit on a hill draw a line of sight across and shoot over another unit on the same hill? Okay, so these are two units on the same hill. Now, back in the day, I remember you used to often have these like two-step hills where the hill had one section, then it went up, and then it had another section, right? Which was like a hill on a hill. And I don't think anyone has struggled to understand that, right? It's just a hill on a hill. Um, but okay, the answer here is a unit that is closer to the top of a hill, in brackets, i.e., the center of the hill or the edge of the battlefield, can draw a line of sight across and shoot over one that is closer to the bottom. Now, I've never read an FAQ before that left me more confused after the FAQ than I was before it. Um, Especially this bit in brackets, right? It says the top of the hill, i.e., the center of the hill. Well, not quite the same thing, is it? I suppose the top of the hill could be the center of the hill, or it might not be. Um, but there you go, right? It says draw a line of sight across and shoot over one that is closer to the bottom. So what is it saying? If your two units are on the same hill, then the height of the unit does matter? Pause for effect there. I don't know. I mean, I'm just confused after this FAQ. I mean, I might just choose to ignore that, to be honest, um, because the only hills that I see on battlefields are a kind of flat hill where there's just one platform to put models on. Um, there isn't like a sort of gradient of the hill where there's like a crest of the hill and a bottom of the hill. It's just you're either on the hill or you aren't. I suppose obviously it just depends on what terrain you're using. But I think that just confuses things a lot, especially as it doesn't say through units there. It just says over the unit, implying that you've got to actually stoop down and see if you can see over the unit. So if they're on the same hill, the height matters, but if they're both on the ground, it doesn't matter. Again, I think this FAQ just confuses things even more. Um, so I come back to my original question. In what circumstances do you actually have to stoop down to look from the model's point of view? Well, maybe it's because of terrain, right? So maybe it's because you've got to see whether the unit that you're shooting at is in cover, right? And it says line of sight can be obscured. Okay, now this was the same in the last edition as well. Um, the first bullet point there says if another model is fully visible, they're not in cover. The third bullet point says if more than half of the model is obscured, they're in full cover. But this second bullet point, I find it a bit weird. It says if up to half of the model is obscured, they're in partial cover. Up to half. So what does that mean? If there's like a rock that obscures the foot of the ogre you're shooting at, then the ogre's in partial cover. I mean, how much does it need to be? Up to half. I mean, is it like a tiny little bit, you know, and that counts? The same thing is repeated in the section for woods. It says any model or unit counts as being behind partial cover as long as up to half of the model or up to half of the models within the unit is within the woods. So if you've got a unit of 40 orcs and 3 orcs are in the woods, then it counts as being in partial cover, which to me is just bizarre, right? And so you've got a lot of these unintuitive things that you're going to have to, I guess, just make sure your opponent is aware of that when you see what terrain is on the table and you see the deployment happening and you think, okay, well, look, this unit's going to end up in the woods. I've got bows. Do they, or the other way around, right? I'm marching through these woods. Obviously, I'm going to just make sure a few of my models are in that wood then, isn't it? To give myself -1 to hit. Um, I mean, let's just look at a diagram here, for example, right? I mean, we've got our dwarf crossbowmen, and here come the orcs. Now, the crossbowman on the far right here cannot see the orc on the far right. The next crossbowman along can only see half of that orc. So what is the unit? 10% obscured, 15% obscured? No more than that, right? Because there's 6 orcs in the front rank. So is that -1 to hit? I suppose it is, right? I mean, what if there was, instead of 12 orcs, there was only 10? Are they a little bit obscured there? I suppose you could say they are, right? I mean, I think you'd be pretty janky saying -1 to hit, right? But if I'm playing those orcs and I've got a close combat army and I'm up against a real shooting army, I'm playing by the letter of the rules, right? I'm partially obscured. I'm up to half obscured by this terrain. So again, it's a little bit weird, isn't it? I think it's the sort of thing you've got to just clarify at the start of the game. Um, and what about your line of sight, right? That orc now, I've sort of moved that rock a little bit. So that orc on the far right is totally hidden by that rock. But if the dwarves are in a different position, now that orc on the end is out of their line of sight anyway. So does it matter? I can only see 5 orcs. None of those 5 orcs are obscured. So it's not -1 to hit now. Yeah. So again, obviously, we're simulating a game here, right? And so there's going to be weird things. You can't simulate a game exactly, but there's going to be a few things which you've just got to accept are going to be a bit weird. But perhaps you need a sort of a discussion really as to how it's going to go down. Cheers, guys. See you on the next one.